Okay, I'll call this meeting to order. Bennington Select Board, Monday, April 9th, 2012, at 6 p.m., Bennington Firehouse. Jason, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Jason. Before I go on with the agenda as it's published, I want to welcome our two new board members. To my left, Chris Van Houten, and on my immediate right, Jimmy Carroll. And welcome both of you. Greg Van Houten. I'll get it out there. And Jimmy Carroll. The next order of business is the reorganization. It's for the board to select the chairman of the board and the vice chairman of the board. Will serve from tonight until the first meeting in April 2013. So we'll have a nomination for the chairman of the board.
I'll nominate Joe Krosick.
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a nomination, a second. Are there any other nominations? No other nominations? Vote on Joe Krosick. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, none. Abstain, none. Okay. Next one is nominations for the vice chair.
I'll move that we nominate Sharon Brush for vice chair.
Okay, I have a motion.
Second.
And I have a second for Jim Carroll. Any discussion? Any other nominations?
I'd like to nominate Jason Morrissey.
Okay, I have a nomination for Jason Morrissey.
I'll second it.
And I have a second for Jason. We'll vote on any other nominations. We'll vote on Sharon. All in favor of Sharon Brush as the vice chair, raise your hand. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. All against? 1, 2, 3. And all, I guess we better vote on Jason's too, right? So it's on the record. All in favor of Jason Morrissey, raise your hand. That's 3. All against? That's 4. So by a margin of 4 to 3, the vice chair will be Sharon Brush.
Thank you.
The next order of business are minutes for March 26th. Any issues, any questions?
Joe, just one point. Jim and I were both at the meeting as other persons, and just since we're going to be voting on accepting the minutes, it might be a point to put us as
So you'll be abstaining?
also people. No, so well, we were present at the meeting.
We're not listed either.
We're not listed on
As being present.
others present. Also present?
Yeah.
So if we're voting on accepting the minutes.
You get that, Nancy?
This is a point of...
Now, the fact that we're not seating chairs, so you'll abstain from this, is that correct? Is that the procedure?
I'm not sure what the procedure is on that, but...
Yeah, they were not part of the meeting.
So
They're
they'll
not
be abstaining on
members.
this. Okay.
So we don't vote on it. All right, thanks.
Any issues, any other corrections on the minutes?
No, I move they be accepted with correction.
Okay, I have a motion.
I'll second
I
that.
have a second. Any discussion? All in favor? That's 1, 2, 3, no. Did we say you're going to abstain?
Oh, I'm sorry, we're going to abstain.
The new ones. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
It's a
4.
rookie mistake.
Yeah.
All against, no. Those abstain, 2. Okay,
I'll
we'll
get used
move
to
on.
not voting.
You don't vote present here. Before we go into warrants, we have another person I'd like to introduce. Mike Harrington, will you please stand up? And can we turn the camera on, Mike? Mike has been hired by the town of Bennington to be Scott Murphy's replacement. He's going to be our new Community and Economic Development Director. So, Mike, welcome aboard, and you got a tough job ahead of you. We'll stay right on top of you, okay? Thank you. Okay, the warrants. And we'll start with Chris. You got any questions on the warrants?
No, sir.
Okay, Justin?
I do not.
Okay.
I do.
Joe? Jim?
Central Vermont
What page?
Oh, I'm sorry. Page 2, item 300, 800. I just wonder, the need for pagers with, the ubiquitousness of cell phones, et cetera.
Which department is that, Stuart?
It's a combination. It includes the town offices, recreation, highway, and wastewater.
And these are pagers used for
These are
official?
pagers that are used by folks. We ask them to carry a pager if they don't carry a cell phone, and because we may need to reach them during the day. And not all of our equipment has radios in it, and that's why that is there.
Okay. Answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes, page 5, first item, Hardigan Company, what is that?
Are you talking about the Hardigan Company?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, Vector Service. Hardigan is hired generally on an annual basis by 2 of our departments. In this case, it's the wastewater department. They actually travel around and literally vacuum or jet manholes and sewer lines, principally those that are in rural areas or forested areas where root intrusion becomes an issue.
On the bottom of the page, Leda Plumbing, this isn't directed specifically towards that organization, but a question that I have, because several constituents have come to me wondering how people are selected in general as contractors. And one person in particular, who I won't mention, felt rather neglected, and I just wondered what kind of selection process is there?
Well, for large projects, we generally use a bid. Now, these are projects that are generally in the thousands of dollars. We'll do a bid process, and if it's a special project and we know that there are local contractors who do this work, we'll mail the bids to those individuals. We may publicize the bid and do it in a much more broad fashion if it's a much larger job. And then there are those that we work with on a continuing basis. For instance, Pru Electric, we work with principally on some of our signal lighting issues, and because they've shown us to be responsive and good with those systems. So it really depends on the job and the department head who's doing the hiring. But if it's a job that exceeds $1,000, we generally look for at least 3 prices, or we bid it publicly.
Okay, so in general, for smaller contractors in general would be invited to come and solicit?
If especially new contractors in the community who are just starting out, if they want to supply us their information, we may not know they exist. They should contact either my office or the office of the department that they're interested in dealing with. If it comes through me, it goes to everybody, so that'd probably be the best bet.
Okay. On page 7, the bottom, Tractor Supply Company, grass seed, and my question is, why don't we use, let's say, Greenberg's, our local
We actually
hardware
might.
store?
We may use
Instead of
Greenberg's
Tractor Supply.
at a given time. It really depends, I think, in this particular case, on what the product is and what we're looking for it to accomplish.
This is grass seed.
And because they are a local company, we also try to spread that business throughout the local environment.
That was it.
Okay. Jason, you have anything?
Yeah, I do. I have one on page 1. The HD arm rental, is that a hydraulic arm? Anderson Equipment.
Let's see, Anderson Equipment.
It's pretty expensive, whatever it is.
Well, my question was, for how long did we have it? Where did we use it? And looking at the date on it of January 20th, I mean, when I think of hydraulic lifts, that's typically warm weather work above the ground, hence the need for a lift. That one stuck out as an odd expense for the middle of January.
It's part of the quarry operation. When we were operating during Irene, this is probably eligible for reimbursement from FEMA if, in fact, FEMA does find that that work is eligible. But we were operating a quarry. We're renting the equipment to operate it using our own people. And that's, given the date, it's a highway department expense. I'm guessing that it's probably Irene.
Where is Anderson Equipment?
I don't have that address.
I'd never heard of them. I just, the date company and the expense I'd never heard of.
I don't know, Jason.
Anything else, Jason?
That's all.
Greg?
I'm good.
Sharon?
Yeah, on page 2, the Casella Waste Management, are they trucking sludge from our wastewater treatment to somewhere?
Yes. Casella is currently trucking the sludge to one of its landfills. This has to do with the closure of our compost facility that I talked about at the last meeting. And we've now done a pricing. This will most likely cease and move into a different contractor and to a different facility. This is going to a landfill. We're now looking at taking it to a composting facility in Williamstown if everything comes together.
And we don't have the capability to truck that ourselves?
No. We only have a 6-member crew. We can't take the time out of the workday to load and truck
Okay, that was all I had.
a large load of sludge.
Stuart, page 5 in the middle, J.A. McDonald, Roaring Branch midsection.
That is probably the last invoice, or one of the last invoices you will see on Irene.
Okay.
I think they're the last of the groups, and I'll look to Dan to nod. Yes, thank you. Yeah. We have a few more projects that we're going to be faced with. One of those is looking at that wing wall off of the bridge at Brooklyn Bridge. People have been calling and wondering about that. We'll actually be doing some testing there. We'll be drilling down in to see whether or not the base of that wall was in some way damaged by the waters. And I think there might be a few other smaller jobs that we'll be looking at, using contractors and engineers as is necessary to do the necessary analysis and get the work done. But we're principally done in the river work.
Okay, for our next meeting, can you one, let us know how much of the anticipated loan or the line of credit we used for this, and with your best guess at what we have remaining of these small projects, not by type, but how many dollars we're looking at. You know, and you can identify the big ones. I mean, if there's something like the one you just mentioned, but I'm more concerned with the dollar part of it right now.
Yeah, we did, along those lines, I know this is probably the wrong time to mention it, but we did receive a positive response. The FEMA folks are going to allow us to open up a, Dan, what's the terminology? Project worksheet on the debris removal, which is about $3.5 million in that stretch of the river. It doesn't mean that all of it will be found eligible, but at least it's the first positive step we've made in trying to recover much of those funds.
Yeah. Okay, and that's all I have on the warrants. Got a lot of citizens out there. Do we have any citizens that would like to speak to the board on an issue that is not on tonight's agenda? You want to come forward, please? And can you come up, just stand, you don't need to bend down to the mic, but just stand over here by the mic so you can, the people at home can hear you? Okay, yeah, sure.
Thank you for hearing our concern.
That's fine.
We live out on Middle Pownell Road,
Okay.
Miles Road, and we're coming about the reclamation of the roads. I'm not sure if you're aware of the issue, but we received a letter last year saying the town wanted to experiment with a few roads, reclaiming them paved roads to become graded roads.
Right.
And we've lived with it, you know, for almost a year now, and it's become pretty intolerable, and that's why we're coming to the board with our concerns.
Okay. Is that when we were going to reclaim the whole thing?
A large stretch of it, yes.
And when will that begin? This
Well,
construction
we've
season?
reclaimed it.
Okay.
The problem here, I think, is a combination of dry weather,
Right.
a dry winter, and a larger, more traffic perhaps than we would have anticipated. I think dust is the principal issue that you're all facing.
It is, yes.
And we've tried to respond by laying by hand at this time of year calcium chloride, but that's not entirely effective. We would normally lay down calcium chloride in June of a given year. But as one of the individuals there, Grace, I've talked with her before, we need to take a hard look at that stretch and see whether or not there's too much traffic for this kind of treatment. The treatment is held relatively well. There aren't a lot of potholes that have developed, but there is a lot of traffic that uses that roadway.
When was it reclaimed, Stuart, do you recall offhand?
It would have been last year.
Was that calcium chloride used at that time, or?
Yes. Yeah, generally it requires an annual treatment for any road that has any kind of a combination gravel and silty surface.
Okay.
Yes, you expressed it well, and we really appreciate that calcium chloride was put on when Grace called, for example. But it is really dust. We don't need to take your time now. If it's better, we've written a letter. We also have a petition because it's really affected the whole use of the area in terms of walkers, bikers, both quality of life, but particularly health we're concerned about. For example, Grace can't open her windows, nor can our neighbor, and we have to keep them closed on windy days. Yeah, and we have a neighbor with asthma who can't walk anymore in the area. It's pretty bad, so we have some photos and just a letter and petition we can share with you if that's best.
Sure.
If you could do anything, I can't tell you how much our lives would be changed. We no longer have walkers like Pete Donovan or a lot of other people they can't take it because when the car goes by, the dust is intense. And then the northwest winds that bring it right straight into our home and all of those that are on Middle Powell Road. So.
Stuart, can you sit down with RJ and come up with a plan to mitigate the problem we got out there?
We'll have to.
Tell us the next meeting. The other thing is, I mean, maybe we made the wrong decision how we reclaim that and address whether or not we should relook on what we do with that road stretch. Well, it does get a lot of traffic.
I mean, I think the reclamation project actually worked.
Okay.
The problem is the dust and the loose fines that are in the material that we're using, and there's really no way. I think we've even been out there and graded it and swept it to try to minimize this. Obviously, not very effective.
Okay.
Is the surface of that road right now different than most dirt roads in the area? Is there something specific to this road, Stuart, that RJ spoke of that you're aware of that's different than any of the others? Or?
Other than it's principally a mixture of old blacktop and gravel. It's not like a gravel road because it does have the blacktop in it, but that does create a different issue for us in dry times in terms of dust. And I think the dust is a little heavier. It's a little more annoying than a gravel road might be, and I just think perhaps the amount of traffic and the speed of traffic out there is a problem for us.
Yeah, it didn't slow people down.
No, and you make a good point about the blacktopping. That's one of our concerns, especially with our baby, is the petroleum products and tar being ground up. I mean, I can't take him on a stroller anymore down our road, and since the recent grading, the dust is just as bad, but there are lots of uneven surfaces and large rocks, and it's something we mention in here too, but it was particularly icy this winter, and then muddy when we did have rain. So,
and you did see cars off the road.
And we did, it's true, we saw cars off the road. So we really appreciate, your consideration.
We will get on it, and Stuart, just make sure you have something in our packet next week, and we'll discuss it at our next meeting.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for making us aware of that. Now, at the time, refresh my memory, we did that piece of the road, but didn't we do something on Peaceful Valley Road too? Something
We
similar?
did Pleasant
Pleasant
Valley
Valley.
Road,
Pleasant Valley?
Niles Road.
Okay.
Niles Road, it doesn't get as much traffic, it's just really around the corner from
Okay.
these folks. We haven't had any complaints there, but it doesn't have the same amount of traffic,
Right.
it doesn't have the same speed of traffic. And Pleasant Valley Road is a dead-end road.
Okay.
So obviously, the speed and the amount of traffic there is...
How long is the stretch of road that we reclaimed on Middle Pownell?
Ooh, God.
I thought that was the longest stretch, wasn't
It
it?
was the longest stretch. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, Justin.
Yeah, it was in June when it was.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, we'll get on that one. Okay, great. Next item on the agenda is a composting proposal. Trevor Mance, would you like to come up, or Dan?
I'll get things
Why
started.
don't you start it? Okay.
Trevor's brought a bunch of folks with him tonight. Just a little background. Really what we're here tonight, for tonight is just to discuss the possibility of TAM Organics running a composting facility at the Houghton Lane transfer station property. The town staff's been working with Trevor for the past 2 or 3 months, trying to find an appropriate location in town. And after many visits to the site with Trevor and with some state regulators, it was determined this site would be a good site to move forward with and try to work out something that was acceptable to the select board. So Trevor is really here tonight to talk about his proposal. We haven't come up with any kind of proposal regarding a lease payment or anything like that. This is really a first step, and if the board felt comfortable with us moving forward, we'd work with Trevor to come up with a mutually acceptable agreement between the town and TAM Organics to move this project forward. So Trevor is here to present his proposal and answer any questions you might have. He's brought a bunch of folks with him who have different expertise on the matter.
I want to ask you a question before we get Trevor up there. Not everybody might be familiar with what we're trying to do out there when you say composting, and there's been a lot in the papers about what, Trevor, your attempt in Shasberry to do it, and with the results there. I'm told, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there's going to be some legislation, if there's not already, that we're going to be required to separate this from solid waste that's already going into our transfer station. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's one of the reasons that we're trying to be proactive here, is that we're the only county in the state that does not have a composting facility. And if this legislation does pass, which I believe it passed in the House, correct? It's in the Senate now, then we will have to come up with a way to deal with that, the organics in the waste stream, instead of putting them into a landfill.
Okay.
So,
Trevor, you want to come forward?
let Trevor elaborate.
I'm sure many people know you, but go ahead and introduce yourself again and your company.
Well, this is my first time to the Bennington Select Board, so thank you for having
Some
me.
of us watch Shasberry Select Board.
Now, how can you? They're the same night.
Reruns.
Reruns.
Yeah. So I'm Trevor Mance, owner of TAM. We're a garbage company in Shaftesbury. I've been in business for 15 years, picking up garbage, branched into roll-off containers, branched into construction debris, tearing down houses and stuff. So we set about maybe 2 years ago, kind of got the green bug and decided that it's time, after, at that point, 12 years or so, to start looking at some environmental projects. We had our core business, but we wanted to add something to it to show some corporate, social awareness, so to speak. We looked at solar projects, got pretty close to pulling the trigger on doing a solar project, but just found that so much of the financing was based on tax incentives that we kind of backed away. And then the idea of organics, Mary Beth McGuire and I were at a Waste Expo show and kind of saw organics as the up-and-coming hot topic in the waste industry. And we said, well, what better of a project than something that's very near and dear to us now, actually a waste stream that we deal with. And it is also such a green project to remove this from our traditional waste management structure, which is put it in a landfill or incinerate it and turn it back into a usable commodity, so to speak, a soil amendment or a high-quality compost that can be used to grow things locally. We pursued the project in Shaftesbury on a piece of land that was owned by my family. That did not go as we expected it to. There was a lot of concerns from the neighbors. We sought a path of least resistance to see if there was a better site that fit. Dan was very helpful, and I have to commend Bennington for at least, taking our idea, saying, how can we make this work? Stuart's been very helpful, and just trying to see what the best way to pursue this project is. And we came upon the town of Bennington's transfer station property. It fit the state regulations and then some. In fact, any of the new rules being proposed in Shaftesbury, it far exceeds even those rules that are being proposed and being drafted during this moratorium period. But I want to kind of, and certainly there's going to be plenty of questions, and I talk fast, and this is what I've been doing for 15 years, so I apologize if I'm kind of going too fast. But let me back up and start right with what composting is. Composting, and what we want to do, is take a carbon product, which is, to boil it down to basic things, any of your browns, so to speak. So your leaf waste, your any kind of horse manure, wood waste, and you mix that with your greens, which is your nitrogen. Nitrogen being food scraps, nitrogen being cow manure is a nitrogen product. It's higher in nitrogen than horse manure. Other nitrogen would be like grass clippings. So you have your browns and you have your greens. 80% of the mixture is browns. 80% of it's your horse manures, your leaves, hay, and then 20% of it's your nitrogen products. The 20% is the waste stream that I'm used to dealing with. TIM hauls approximately 15,000 tons of garbage a year is what our current volume is. State estimates are that around 35% of our waste stream is organics. This is kind of the last untapped resource, and especially untapped in this area. As Dan pointed out, this is the last county to not have a composting facility in the state of Vermont. Bennington is kind of different in that we don't have a solid waste management district. I think that it's a credit to the towns in this area, the Yankee attitude of we can do this and we don't need state regulation. And I'm sorry to say that because I have a couple state regulators here. But it served us well. The market has borne good things with recycling, and now this organics project kind of shows that there are people in the area that can make up for the idea that we don't have a solid waste management board that is funded by taxpayer dollars that is forcing this upon us. So what we want to do is we want to find a spot that fits. We feel as though this spot fits very well, both in all the regulatory issues, and also it serves a great need for the community, and also it acts as a resource for the town of Bennington. This is being mandated, and I'm going to introduce Carrie Hengstenberg, who is our composting specialist at the Agency of Natural Resources. She's here to answer any kind of questions that you may have specifically about that bill. But it did pass the House. It's moving to the Senate. What it's saying is, in a few years from now, all organics need to be taken out of the waste stream. First, it's going to be recycling as mandatory. Then we're moving on to organics. So it's in the works. It's coming down. We want to step up. We want to do this as a project. It's not a large profit center, but it's the right thing to do. And we want to try to find a spot that fits. And we feel as though the town may have that spot.
Yeah, this is, you might recall, I know you do, but people in Bennington, we did electronic waste a few years ago, and we were proactive in that. So we would get rid of our computers and televisions, things of that sort, so they weren't going into the landfills. That was a major project, or a problem, actually. Let's say the food waste, and I'm not sure who all your customers are, but let's say a cafeteria at the high school or middle school, or let's say the local restaurants. If I understand what the legislation is going to be, and we'll ask A&R to clarify it, but these folks will no longer be able to get rid of it the way they're getting rid of it. They're going to have to take a contract with someone to pick this up and separate it to this compost. I think that's the general way the bill reads.
It is. The bill reads that it needs to be removed from the waste stream.
Right.
What you do with it from that point is being left up to the customer. For example, if there's an anaerobic digester in the area,
right,
they could use that. If there was a farm that wanted the material to feed to animals, they could use that. So I don't want to portray this as you have to use a composter, but I do want to, the bill's heart and soul is that it cannot be handled in the traditional methods anymore.
Yep.
Nor can your stuff at the transfer station. You do have a lot of leaf waste, you do have a lot of yard waste. We could offer that now as an organics drop-off spot for residents to help mitigate their per bag fee, right, and keep their costs down as well.
Board members, got questions? No?
Yes. I admire your the green approach to this, and what happens to the first question is, what happens to the compost? Would you reuse it, sell it? Would it be available to townspeople for their own use?
Yep, our goal is to I'm sorry?
Which of those? Or is it all of them?
All of them.
Okay.
Well, it would be available to anyone. What we're hoping to do is make both a topsoil product, because we are in a lack of topsoil mode. We just simply don't generate enough. Our topsoil is washing out, and we don't have enough to use on our fields and also on construction projects. So one of our lines that we would try to make would be a premium topsoil. The other line that we would try to make would be organic compost. Getting into this, I do have some wonderful expertise that we've hired to help start this project. We're going to work closely with Highfields Institute for Composting, a nonprofit company. We've got some people on staff now that have some expertise. My plan is to become a master composter at school, which is part of the new requirement. You have to have training to run one of these facilities. So I can't give you a straight answer, Jim, of what the final product would be. We know that it's going to be one or a mixture of those, but certainly available in the Bennington area for sale, yes.
In addition to that, along the lines of reducing your carbon footprint, as I understand it, all this organic waste would need to be hauled to the transfer station, correct?
The organic waste would need to be, or currently is?
Would be. Currently it is there, but insofar as average citizens, I just chuck it in with the rest of my garbage, and I'm just wondering if perhaps you might think along the lines of having local gathering places in town, places to deposit it that would further reduce people's carbon footprint driving all the way up to the dump. And with your trucks, you could come by conceivably and collect it on a weekly basis instead of hundreds of people having to drive up there with relatively small amounts of waste.
Two thoughts on that. One is that our goal would be to add organics to our collection services for folks. We need to start off. I know, and that's the issue. Everything has to be an economy of scale, so to speak. So we have to have enough to justify going to a place. Phase one would not be the household pickups. It would be restaurants. It would be school systems. It would be the hospital. It would be Bennington College, who's very anxious to see this happen, actually a big catalyst in this. So we would hit the large institutions first, get a route going that we could then add the smaller stuff and kind of work our way down at that point. That being said, anybody could, I would hope that we would open it up at the transfer station as a free option for folks that are wanting to bring it up there, because Bennington does not have the opportunity to have a lot of backyard compost bins. And that's kind of very different than the Shaftesbury idea, where folks said, well, we have a lot of compost bins in our backyard. We don't necessarily need this. Bennington's kind of the flip of that. And also with this project, we would want to incorporate some educational add-on to the school districts. I understand the junior highs looking at composting. We would love to work with them. We went through the exercise of looking at this with Bennington College as a school-run issue. What they ran into was what happens during the school breaks. It's a process that needs to be managed and managed consistently. There's a lot of state regulation on time, temperature, recordings. It's kind of like your taxes. You have to keep these records for years after you close the facility. So there's a lot of work that goes into this. So what they found was, we want to team up with somebody that's going to do this and manage it throughout the year. And I would love to work with the school districts and say, let's do it. Let's bring the kids on board. Let's have an educational component to it. And let's see, and maybe the schools, I don't know, we can certainly work on that, but where some drop-off points may be, maybe that's it. Maybe we work with the schools and have them be a drop-off location as well and take it from there. I don't know. That's
a good idea.
Certainly things. What I'm kind of seeking is the idea, kind of the thumbs up to say, yeah, let's look into this. We're open to it as a select board, and then we want to really hash out those deals, the ideas to see where this goes.
Great, thank you.
Greg?
Is it normal for a site like this to be used for animal mortality composting, or?
I wouldn't say that there's any system that's normal. As with any kind of agriculture, and this is basically agriculture. And what we're doing is we're taking organics, putting it in, organics coming out. Certainly on-farm composting has been designed for animal mortalities. We are not thinking that that's a route that we want to go. We don't see that as a really big need. Certainly the farms handle their animal mortalities and I assume do a good job.
I've read a lot about using them for fish, you know, and whatnot, but I wasn't sure if that was something you were.
I would certainly think that there could be those types of feedstocks coming in. You know, you take like a Price Chopper or something. It's an account that we service, and they produce 10 tons of waste every week, and primarily I'd say 80% of it's food waste.
Okay. How does that affect, you know, obviously from our perspective, one of the things we're going to hear about is the nuisance factor, whether odors and things like that. How does that
traffic
play out?
and odors and those things.
Yeah. What do you see as the nuisance factor in something like that?
I see that there's potential for nuisance. I see that there's potential for odor. I think that there's potential. Odor is really the biggest. Truck traffic, we're not talking about a lot of truck traffic. We're talking about, on average, 2 to 3 trips a day.
All right, that's what you had said here.
This is starting off as a very small facility. It's actually so small on the state scale that it requires at first a registration with the state and then working into a full permit. So we want to get our feet wet. We want to make sure that it works for us. We want to make sure that it works for the town, and then we're going to build on that. The biggest thing, and if you're speaking to other composters out there or state regulators, I think the common thread that you're going to find is that distance to neighbors is key. With any type of these facilities, setbacks, setbacks, setbacks. And what we like the most about this site is we have a landfill, we have a transfer station that's active, we have a lot of the browns coming in anyways, and we have truck traffic going in there, so it's not foreign to this area. We also have much bigger setbacks in the state's new rules, which just went into effect, Carrie can help me with this, a month ago or so. So they've kind of redone their rules. These are not old rules. These are not rules that have not been well thought or fought. And they set the new setbacks with that in mind. We need to help these facilities succeed. So let's make sure that we have the right setbacks. And this one, don't quote me, but I'm thinking that we're at least 2 times as far to any neighbors as the state requires. If we're not, it may even be more. I think the new rules are like 300 feet. I think that the closest house would be like 700. So we've got big setbacks. Our setback to the natural resources such as groundwater exceeds what we need. The setback to bedrock exceeds what we need. So the truck traffic is there already. The potential nuisances are mitigated best with setbacks. But that being said, you have to have a qualified operator. This is not throwing a bunch of stuff in a pile and hoping for the best. This is a technical process. This is, I've been reading for the last 2 years this book, and I thought that I was back in calculus class. When I go to the master composting school, I hope they let you use a calculator because the formulas are like huge. And so it has to be done right. It has to be given, you know, a lot of resources to make it operate correctly. And when it does work, and it does, as long as you follow the recipe and follow the composting rules. I was hoping to have Dan Goosen, who's a former classmate of mine here. He's a Bennington native, and he runs the Green Mountain composting facility up north. He couldn't make it because of a budget meeting tonight, but he's the general manager of a composting facility. So we've talked, and he has a wonderful wealth of knowledge and also expertise. And you know, when done correctly and when the recipe's developed right, and then it's just keep doing the same thing and over and over.
Other board, Sharon?
You actually are going to build a building to house this, is that correct? Is that how it's done, or is it?
It can be done in many, many different ways. There's composting systems from just an open windrow, which is you know, just a pile 5 feet tall, 10 feet wide. A bucket loader comes in and turns it when it reaches the correct temperature to kind of cool the pile or to aerate it to get the moisture content where you need it to be. There's Then there's an intermediary where you have like a bunker system with some forced aeration where you're blowing fans in underneath it to add the oxygen. That kind of cuts down on the amount of fuel and labor it takes to manage it because you're kind of forcing the air in so you don't have to roll it. You can jump up to an enclosed building. The facility that Dan runs at Green Mountain Compost is a $3 million building with a solid bunkers, roof over it, the forced aeration, the whole 9 yards, funded by Chittenden County Solid Waste District.
So what are you going to start out with?
I want to look, if I get the nod from you guys, what I'd like to do is to work on the finances of this, to figure out where that puts us. And I think that I want to explore the idea of the opened windrow versus a bunker system with the forced aeration system. And that really, it's not that one's better or worse, it's more of a operational idea of how much diesel fuel do you want to put into a loader to turn this, how much input do you want to do, both man and machine. The end result is you can make compost and quality compost either way. It's just how much you want to put into it. So the two options I'm looking at, to be very direct, a forced aeration system with bunkers and the pipes through it, or just an open windrow.
Okay, and typically compost is not supposed to have an odor.
No.
Is that correct?
If it's operated correctly, if you've got, it's the whole idea of anaerobic versus aerobic, which one means you have oxygen, one means you don't have oxygen. When you create a pile of anything without oxygen that's trying to break down, that's when you get your odors. No different than a garbage can that does not have oxygen and your garbage starts to rot. Rotting and composting, completely opposite. Not the same process. So this is a very managed system.
Okay. Stu, I have a question. On the map that we have, this one that shows where the proposed facility is, how far away is that from the transfer station? This is this the sand pit back here?
Yes, it's currently where we crush our gravel, we stockpile stones and large tree trunks, which ultimately we will burn or crush in other ways. It's more than several hundred feet.
Okay, and this is, are there any houses on Rocky Lane other than down by?
There are two homes right at the end of Rocky Lane, and then there is is it the Mennonites that have a facility right at the end of Rocky Lane? Both, I think, about 600?
That's the ones that I was calculating, not the Houghton Lane. The Houghton Lane, I would say that has to be close to 1,000 feet.
Yeah, it's several hundreds of feet.
Yeah.
But I think the properties on Town Line Road would be the closer properties to that particular location. What makes this location interesting also is, one, in front of it you have the former Superfund site.
Right.
A huge mound we maintain. Behind it, the ground rises once again and then levels off on a kind of a plateau. And I don't know what Trevor's exact plans are to how he might change the elevations. But right now, you sit down in a bowl when you look down in that area. And if he operates in that location in that way, I think it's going to create very little issues for the adjoining properties, because everything will be relatively contained from a site perspective, from a wind perspective, air movement perspective. But that will really depend on what he needs to do. And since you've given me the floor, I'd like to mention that Bennington does operate a compost facility, or did up until a few months ago. And in fact, I reached out to Trevor when we were beginning to have problems with our facility, because the sawdust material that we're using is being priced out of sight thanks to wood pellet stoves. And we were beginning to have a dust problem because of the dryness of the hardwood sawdust we were using, and talked to Trevor a little bit about whether or not his project might work in our facility. And his concern is that, one, the facility might not have sufficient space for him to operate easily because there are so many other buildings around it. Two, obviously, we would love to be able to mix our sludges into this mix, and that creates a whole new regulatory issue.
Do the new board members know where that location we're talking about?
The old
This?
No, where Stuart's talking now.
I'm talking about a wastewater treatment facility.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Oh, okay.
Harrington Road.
All right.
That's where we compost our human
right,
waste,
yeah,
or
driven by
did until a short time ago.
And so,
And one of the questions I had for Trevor, and perhaps it's more appropriate for the individual from Agency of Natural Resources, if we use our product in the state, at least when we first opened, they wanted to have each site that we used it certified because it was human waste, which is different than organic waste. And I'm thinking that, given what you talked about, making it available as a topsoil additive and organic compost that you would actually sell to your neighbors, that you're not facing that same kind of restriction as long as you meet the requirements of the law.
Correct. Biosolids are very different than a food scrap and manure type composting, yes.
How large of an area is this area outlined on the map here that you plan on starting with? Do you know offhand?
The area that's denoted on the map is somewhere around 24,000 square feet, so approximately a half an acre. And to just kind of touch back on Stuart's point, we would leave up all we would keep the elevation where it is. We would simply level where we were looking, keeping all the vegetation except for, say, a couple popple trees that are just in the need of leveling it. So we would maintain the general topography of that site.
And if this expanded to what you think that it may, how much larger of an area do you think you would need to expand out to? Do you have any idea what that may look like?
Looking at and actually trying to remember the site, I think it's G Stone Environmental, has actually, the state has funded a very large project of kind of going out to all the state of Vermont, and Bennington County was one of the counties that they looked at, and looked at what the potential for food scraps are, because that's kind of the feeding, the main feedstock that we want to do here. This process is expensive. It needs to have revenue source on both ends to make it work. So you need to have that landfill tipping fee avoidance to come in. You need to have sale on the other side. So G Stone was hired, I believe, by the Agency of Natural Resources. And they kind of put out the projections of what these areas have to offer for incoming material. So with those projections, we looked at that and said, best case scenario here, what could we hope to capture for the market? And I think that a realistic build out would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 4 acres. Obviously very dependent on the technology. The nice thing with a forced aeration system is that the turnover time is very quick. You can actually make compost that's done, biologically done, basically in about 45 to 60 days. Then it needs to cure, which is just kind of resting and kind of letting it fizzle out. When it's completely done, at put in your packets, the technical term of cured is that it's biologically inactive, so it doesn't heat up anymore. It's just like a pile of dirt that you stick your hand in and there's no heat. So technology can affect how big of an area you use. So, did that answer your question?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
any other questions? You will not be using any farm waste then in this, or you do plan?
We do plan on using farm waste, yes. Horse manure is a commodity that doesn't have a lot of farm value because primarily horse manure is wood chips or wood shavings. So it makes great compost feedstock, but it doesn't necessarily make good manure to spread on your field because it doesn't have the nitrogen content. So we would definitely use horse manure as an incoming feedstock.
And have you dealt with any of either the horse farmers or the large farmers in the area to see what they think about working with you on this?
Yes, they're all very excited.
Armstrong, any of those guys?
Yep, and I'm shocked. I mean, we did kind of a pilot project with Vanderwerken's farm in Shaftesbury, and they produce almost 40 yards of horse waste per week. Mm-hmm. We put a 30-yard roll-off in and said, hey guys, try it, see how it goes. They loved it. The ladies backed up, dumped the wagons right into the 30-yarder, and it was mounted at the end of the week, and that's one horse farm. And the issue with horse farms is a lot of these don't have the acreage
dump
to
it.
spread, even if they want. So that the state's coming down and saying, you need to manage your manure, you have to do it responsibly, no more pushing it into the stream. So there's a market for this to happen.
Stuart, will we have to, if this goes forward, will we have to coordinate and bring Casella in on all this?
Actually, the land that Trevor is looking at is not part of the leased acreage that Casella uses for the recycling and transfer station. So obviously, we would keep them informed. They operate the scale house. Access to this facility would be at the lower road.
Right.
So they wouldn't be coming through the scale house area. But we'd want to keep Casella informed. I mean, they're a current contractor at that site, and obviously, they monitor the site for us when they're there. So we'd want them to understand what's happening.
Okay. Can we ask the young lady from A&R come up, please? Introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Carrie Hengstenberg. I work with the Agency of Natural Resources in the Solid Waste Management Program. And so our program, we manage basically all the trash, recycling, and composting in the state. We have two sections. One is a regulatory section, which I work in with my coworker, Jeff, who's sitting over there. And then we also have a planning section who has been working more closely on the state solid waste plan. They work with Stuart on Bennington Solid Waste Implementation Plan and the recent legislation that has gone through. And as Trevor just mentioned, we just passed some new composting rules. On March 15th, they became effective. And those were probably about 3 years in the making. And we took a set of regulations that was probably 5 pages long.
Let me ask you, these are rules for the commercial composting?
Yep, commercial composting. Okay. And we turned them into about 30 pages long. And the reason that we did that is because we wanted to be as prescriptive as possible about what the expectations were when you run a composting facility. So as Trevor's mentioned some of these things, but we increased the setbacks, in particular to neighbors and drinking water supplies. We have an operator training requirement. We have clearer liquid stormwater management requirements in the rule, and also more specific requirements about managing odors and birds, and how you deal with incoming material, how long you can let it sit on the site.
So how many of these rules were written because of the problem you had in Montpelier with the chicken farm?
Actually, most of these rules were written because of the problem we had in Burlington with Intervale compost.
Okay. Intervale's green.
What? Yeah.
Intervale was the big green model for us to follow up there, isn't it?
Well, it was. Well, no, it wasn't. It is now, because they moved from their existing site, actually got shut down, and they moved to a new site where they built that $2 million facility. But that's what prompted these new rules, is between the site in Montpelier and the site in Burlington, our rules just were not very clear on what the expectations were, and when it came down to trying to enforce things, we just couldn't do it.
I bring up the Montpelier thing because let's say we do this, Trevor sets up a model, we've got it, okay? But we get someone else out there, tries to do, if I remember what the Montpelier guy was, I mean, it really wasn't a compost. He was trying to sell it as that. It stunk. It smelled all over the place, if I remember right. But
what happened in Montpelier?
He was trying to sell it as a composting site and get by with all the regulatory requirements, if I remember.
Actually, he operates two sites, and a lot of people get this confused. One is in Montpelier on Main Street. That's the site that causes a lot of the problems. And then he has another site in East Montpelier that's on a dairy farm. So the site in Montpelier, he feeds the food scraps to chickens, and that is not regulated by us, because it's regulated by the Agency of Agriculture, because it's considered animal feed and not composting. So in that site, he'd put the feed out, the food scraps out, mix it with some other animal feed, and let his chickens eat it. But what would happen was birds would come in, pick up the food scraps, and drop them on the neighbor's property. And so I think that was less of an odor issue, but more of a nuisance issue with trash and birds.
Okay.
But this is not the same kind of situation,
right,
because we could never step in there because we didn't have the jurisdiction to step in there. It was actually the town health officer who finally made some requirements there, and it's going better now.
What happens if legislation is passed and we don't have this facility up and running? How will that affect Bennington County? What will we have to do with the stuff, the waste now?
Well, the legislation is phased in, so if it passes, it means in 2014, generators who generate 104 tons or more a year would be required to compost. And that is a lot. There probably isn't even a grocery store in Bennington. Well, a big grocery store might generate that much food waste. So those are the people that you're talking about. In Bennington College, they would fall in. Those are the really big generators. And then in 2015, it's people who generate 56 tons a year. 2016, it's people who generate whatever half of that is.
So they will have to contract with someone to come in and take it outside of Bennington County to dispose of it, compost it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Particularly those large amounts, you know, in some small rural areas is where sometimes people might set up a relationship with a farmer. They might feed it to their chickens. But if you have the big concentrated food waste, they'd be coming in and getting it. And really, there are no composting facilities in Windham County or Windsor County. There's one in Rutland, but it's not highly functioning. So essentially, statewide, there's not really any active composting south of Route 4. So I imagine the county would be hauling it pretty far.
Okay. If any of us want to go see a site that's functioning well now, along the lines of what Trevor wants to do, where would you recommend?
I actually brought you a few photos, but...
Does Jen Holloway run one up there?
Well, the one in Williston is much bigger than anything Trevor would propose.
Okay.
I think there's two. I brought some pictures here, and you can keep them and look at them later. But you know, I think what Trevor's proposing to do is to start off with what we call a small facility, and there's several small facilities operating now. Most of them are on farm, so kind of an accessory that a farmer is doing on the side is starting to do some food waste composting, and it usually consists of 2 or 3 large windrows, and that's basically it. And then as you move up into the next size of a medium composting facility, you know, that's where people might have 10 or 12 windrows and a real gravel composting pad, and it'll look more like he's trying to do something there, so he can work the piles a lot. So the one I would recommend seeing if you're going to see any is to see the one in Highfields, the Highfields Center for Composting. And the reason it's all the way in Hardwick, so it's far away.
Right.
But the reason I recommend that one is because they are doing a lot of different pilots. So they're doing open windrow composting, but then they've been building these bays, like Trevor mentioned, to do the active aerated static pile, and using basically different methods of technology. So one has a concrete floor, one has a wood chips floor, one has, you know, different levels of investment for the composter. And so their plan is to try these different methods out, see how well they work, so they can help educate people in the field. And a lot of the composters are moving to that forced aerated static piles because it's faster, and odors are virtually non-existent with that technology, because when most of the odor problems we see at facilities are in the incoming material, because it comes in really, really wet, and if you don't get your initial mix right, that's when you get the odors. The most biological activity is going on in the first couple of weeks of composting, but with the active aeration, it's happening in the first couple of weeks, but it's being actively aerated, so it's not turning anaerobic and causing those odors.
Okay. Any questions for the young lady from Agency of Natural Resources? Do you work with the e-waste at all program?
Yeah, they work in our program too. Yep.
I'm just curious, is that working the way the legislation intended to work for the e-waste? I haven't heard any complaints in Bennington. People are getting rid of their TVs
I think it's
and stuff.
working, that people are disposing of their waste for free. I don't know enough on the back end how well it's working for the manufacturers and the contracting.
Well, you know what they think about it.
Right. So I think that I've heard maybe they want to make some changes on that end, but I don't think we've had any complaints from residents or people who are using the system. I think they're just going back to the legislature now with their first report on how it's going.
Okay. Great.
The sites that are operating successfully around the state, are they traditionally commercial sites, or are they subsidized sites, or municipalities, or is it all of the above?
It's all of the above, yeah. Yeah, there's some that are subsidized by the solid waste district. There's some that are farmers. And then there's a couple that are just people similar to Trevor who are doing it to try to make a living. What's unique about this situation with TAM is one of the issues that's come up in other parts of the state is the hauling of organics, that it's difficult to find a hauler willing to haul organics. And that might change as this ban goes into effect, but historically over the last few years, that's been a real holdup because it involves running another route with your truck. And if you don't have enough accounts, you can't run another truck, and it's hard to get interest there. So to me, this seems like a successful model because you have both pieces there, and you don't have to one doesn't have to try to find the other. I think I could work well.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Thanks for driving down. You in Waterbury now, or they move you someplace else? Where's your office now?
Yeah, we're in Graniteville.
Yeah?
At the Rock of Ages quarry.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming down. I know it's quite a trip, okay?
Can we see the picture?
Oh, yeah, I'll leave these pictures with you.
Thank you.
You can look in. Oh, and I printed off part of the legislation. You can look at that too.
Thank you.
So tonight was just to inform us and to inform the citizens of Bennington what our proposal is. When do you feel you'll have plans a little more solid to come here and actually ask us for approval to move forward?
If I may, I think that what we would want is kind of that thumbs up or thumbs down if this is something that the board would entertain. The process from this point would be that we would need to negotiate with Stuart a lease agreement, or the board directly. I don't know how that works in Bennington. We would then need to do a development review board application, and we would also need to do an Act 250 because everything that TIM does is required to have Act 250. So and then we would also need to register with Carrie in the beginning until we work up to a volume that we would need a full certification. So eventually there's 3 levels of permitting with this. To pursue the plan, I really come tonight looking for that kind of idea of, is this something that you want to pursue? Because to take it from this point means a capital investment. It means a lot of resources, kind of gearing up for the idea that this could be a reality if we can come to some terms on lease agreements and so forth.
Okay. Board members.
My opinion is we ought to support this and have Trevor go forward in good faith and come back with some proposals and direct Stu to work with Trevor to come up with a fair lease agreement for all parties and get this thing started.
Okay. I'm not going to ask for a motion yet, but just let's discussion.
Yeah, just general discussion. I agree with everything Jason said there. I think this is a good opportunity for us. It seems like it's a good opportunity for his company. I think it's something we should move forward on.
Okay.
And I would support it also. I think it's a great idea. It's something that, is really going to come down the road in the future, and I think something that everybody should do as well as recycling and, keeping the community as green as possible.
Greg?
Are there any zoning issues on the site or anything like that for this use?
We don't expect any. I've met with Trevor. That's why we chose this site, because there's already composting going on there, and one manner of speaking, with the leaf waste and the chipped waste that we have there. It's a solid waste facility, so it would be basically an expansion of that use that Trevor would go to the DRB to get approval. All the neighbors are going to get notified in 2 proceedings, the DRB and the Act 250, so I know Trevor's going to reach out to those folks once he knows that this is a process that the board feels comfortable with. So yeah, we don't see any big red flags for those permitting processes, but he does need to go through those.
Okay. I'd be supportive.
Okay, have the board member comments? This is not a public hearing, but it's some information. Any citizens out there like to come forward and speak on this? Sean Murray, you want to come forward? Are you talking as a citizen or as the chair of the board?
No, I'm actually talking, I guess I could talk as the chair of the Mount Anthony Board.
Introduce yourself, please.
I'm Sean Marie Oler, and this is Helen Fields, a teacher up at the middle school. And Trevor, you don't know us. And for the last 18 months to 2 years, we've been working on an ag committee that we have up at the middle school. You've probably read about it in the papers and heard about it on BTN. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to look at how we could do this ourselves. And I actually reached out to BCRC, and we were looking to see where there might be resources to do this. And I was told to hold my horses and that there may be something coming. So we have talked to our food service. I mean, Jim Morrison has to be on board, the board has to be on board, but we're very interested in doing this, and we've had...
From disposing of the waste or from the educational portion of the kids?
Well, actually, the education is happening and both.
Okay.
And what we were talking about is, would it be more efficient for us to try and do something small scale? Or would it be, you know, we'd have to start gradually. I was up in Burlington today at the Edmonds School watching how they do, you know, how they do their compost up there. I know the high school in Burlington does it, and they take it to Intervale, wherever Intervale is now. And so we've been kind of modeling it on how we could do it sort of like they do it up north. And we really had no idea this was coming to here. We were just trying, from an educational standpoint, trying to teach our kids how we could continue doing this for the future. So I can speak for the board that we support it. I can't certainly say, you know, we're going to sign on, but it's something we've actually been working on. And Helen has actually pretty much been spearheading our ag committee, and we have Act 250 permits, and we went through all those hoops, and we have to use the land in a way that complies with the permit, and we are doing that.
This is the middle school land?
This is the middle school land up on the East Road.
Yep.
Almost to Houghton Lane.
So our goal is incorporating agriculture and sustainable living across the curriculum, which we're in the process. We've been in the process of doing for the last couple of years. We have gardens. We're generating a little bit of compost product that way, but would like to not only find a way to teach all 600 of our kids how to do food composting and separation so that they can take that home, and in 4 years you'll have hundreds and hundreds of people that know how to do it already. But in addition to that, operating so that composting becomes part of the whole science curriculum for how to live sustainably, and it allows us to incorporate that piece into the program of feeding yourself and your community.
And just in terms of scale, we are for all of our schools, we're probably the second largest employer in town. So our food waste for the middle school is 600 kids plus adults. I think Bennington College has about the same in terms of students. So we probably are comparable in terms of amount. But as you know, we'd have to separate meat from different kinds of food. So we couldn't just do it right away. Okay. But we're very excited.
Great, thanks. Any other citizens like to speak to this? I'll just speak from my 8 years in the legislature on natural resources. I was involved in some of the solid waste district things, and I will tell you there's a lot of waste going in our landfills we don't need to be going in anymore, and I'm sure that's why this legislation is being thought of and pushed through. I was part of the e-waste legislation, which I think is not only did it solve things going into the landfill, but it definitely helped people like me. I had 5 televisions in my basement trying to figure out what to get rid of them, and computers. But I think it's good legislation, and more good legislation, I believe, it's something we need to do down here. So I'll ask for a motion from the board to give Stuart permission to move forward and coordinate with TAM on this. So moved.
I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion? All right, we have a motion to allow our town manager to work with Trevor Mance in coming up with this plan. All in favor? And that's unanimous. Trevor, thanks for coming, and I admire what you're trying to do here. I know it's more than just business to you, because I know I've watched you operate, and obviously you're getting support from our school district, which is important, and you talked about the educational aspect, so you're too young to remember, but I'm old enough to have kids to know when they got in this recycling thing, they drive you crazy at school until you go get the different colored garbage cans, put this in, that, and everything else. And I'm sure that my grandkids are probably doing that now, so good briefing, and thanks for the information. And Stuart, just keep us posted as this plan goes forward, okay?
Will do.
All right, the next item is the community visit discussion. There was an article in the paper you might have read about when Paul Costello was here. I think it was Monday he was here, no, last Thursday I think he was here, to talk about coordinating our meeting we're going to have this coming Thursday, right here where we're sitting, to discuss the main themes that came out of our 15 March meeting, ours, I say the communities. And Paul would not tell us what those were. They're a secret. He's going to disclose them when he puts them on butcher paper, I guess, around this room is his plan, and we're all going to get the vote on them, the issues here. And the goal of this is to narrow down the 20 or 25, I think he has, down to 4 or 5. We, the community, feel that we can take on and make happen and improve not only the quality of life, but the economic development area for Bennington as a whole. So I encourage people, please come 6:30 right here this coming Thursday. It'll probably last till about 9 o'clock. You'll get the opportunity to vote. I've had people ask me, did you have to go to the first meeting and come to this one? The answer is no. If you didn't come to the last one, you just missed a good time. Come to this one, and you'll have a great time. And we do want your input. And this is going to be something that we're going to move forward. Dan, you want to add anything to that?
The only thing just to add is that they will be back one more time once those 4 or 5 objectives are identified, and they're going to work with the groups of folks that sign up to move these objectives forward to come up with an implementation plan. They'll bring experts from across the state and from the federal government to help with whatever those objectives are.
Yeah, and that phase is the resource phase, they call it. That's where folks like hopefully Senator Leahy, Senator Sanders, Congressman Welch, they figure out where they get the money to help us move some of these things if there's money involved. So please join us here this coming Thursday at 6:30. Okay, a discussion on boards and commissions. We're not going to discuss what we've got opening, Select Board. Issue came up how we want to proceed with this. Do we want to interview all applications for these positions, or do we want to take and interview only those who are new to applying to a position, open for discussion? Folks have been here for a while. Let's, Jason, your comments?
Well, Joe, all I can say is, without naming names, of course, there's a few people in there that I'm obviously going to vote for. I've seen their track record. I know what they stand for. I know what I know what they've done in the past. That gives me a sense of what they're going to do in the future. I think to the people who've been through the interview process once or twice, they probably recognize some of those names. What I would suggest is probably the best thing to do is anybody who's new ought to be interviewed without exception. And if there's any incumbents that anybody on this board wants to interview, I think one is enough. Then we interview that person, and I think we can discreetly slip those names in an email to Stu over the next 3 to 4 days this week, and that'll give us the list we need to move forward.
Okay, Sharon?
Yeah, I think any new member or any new applicant should be interviewed. You know, I mean, some of these people we've talked to 2 and 3 times, so I think we know where they're coming from.
Okay, Justin, your comments?
Only having the opportunity to sit through one of these processes once, this will be my second. You know, some of these appointments are 3-year term, 5-year term, 4-year term. I think I would like to hear from folks, you know, just to see at a minimum where they come from on issues that they're, you know, they're going to be charged with solving.
Okay, Chris?
Well, actually, I tend to agree with Justin. I think that, you know, in light of the new board members and the dynamic of this board has changed, I think it'd be a great opportunity for the new board members to kind of maybe be introduced to the sitting members of these boards and commissions. And certainly, I think it's appropriate to interview new candidates. And I'm hoping that you know, we are able to generate enough interest from the community to fill some of these boards. I would like to see some things change on certain ends, but I think that it's appropriate for all candidates, sitting members, as well as new potential candidates to be interviewed by us.
Okay.
Can I ask you a question, Joe?
Go ahead.
How long has it been policy to interview?
Everybody?
Yeah.
I'd say
4 years.
3 or 4 years.
Yeah, 3 or 4 years at least.
At least 5. We've done it every year I've been on the board.
It's been a while. I intentionally held off the new folks because obviously you may not know these or the procedures. We'll start with you, Jim. How would you like to go forward with this?
I think it would be very helpful to be able to identify the people who currently are seated there, and I don't know who all of them are. I'm now a former lister, so I know who the listers are, and to put faces to names would be helpful.
Okay, Greg?
I think it would definitely help to know who they are. One of the things I'm thinking of is that we have positions here that maybe as of tonight were, but no one was applying for. I think some of these boards tend to operate anonymously to a lot of members of the community. I don't think it's a bad idea to get them out in the light once in a while and let people meet them, including ourselves. And 'cause there's a lot of them that I don't know. I mean, I know the boards exist and I know what happens, but there's a lot of these folks I don't know, and I'm sure there's a lot more people out there that would help and maybe help get people more involved in these.
So what I'm sensing from this is we'll continue the way we've been operating. We'll bring the folks forward that have asked to be seated in these positions. I'll ask the community, please respond, because I think the last iteration, we went with some positions unfilled, did we not?
Yes.
Because we couldn't find qualified folks to come forward. So the announcement's been in the newspaper. If you got a question on where they are, call Stuart. He'll let you know where they are and what they're going. But please, let's get those who feel have an interest in serving the town in one of these boards, please come forward. So Stuart, we'll go ahead and with the same procedures we've been doing. When we get the applications, we'll start the interview process. Does it work well prior to our meeting, let's say a half hour before our scheduled meeting on select board for the, when you want to do it, or you want to do special meetings?
I think it depends on the number of people we
want
have.
to do it?
Yeah.
Okay.
If I recall back to last year, I almost want to say we had a special meeting, and then we met a second time before our regularly scheduled meeting for a couple of folks.
All right, we'll play that one by ear. We'll see how many applicants we get and whether we have to do a special one or not, okay?
Got a question.
Very good.
Go ahead.
I wonder if, is there a place on the Bennington Town website where these positions are listed? Because if I suggested this to a couple people.
I'm guessing that we either will have them up or can put them up onto the website.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions on the boards and commissions? All right, liquor licenses, Stuart?
Yes, I did hand out an amended list. I'll send down the original here. This just requires your signature. These are all renewals. We have no new applicants tonight.
Okay. Manager's report.
Yes, I have only one action item. I'll first make an announcement. For those, you folks already know it, and I think it's been in the paper, but we did reach a settlement on the Sunset Mobile Home Park health order. The settlement is in the press packet, I believe, and it basically achieves compliance, which is, I think everyone's goal here, over the next 90 days. We were pleased that we were able to hammer out an agreement that works for all the parties, doesn't put too much of a onus on the owner of the park to do things too quickly, but it does require that things get done. So that was good news.
Do new board members understand what we did up there and what took place and where we stand right now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The action item is one that is brought forward by the Planning Commission. You'll recall we did receive a grant with matching funds from the community as well as from the town to develop a strategic economic development plan for the town of Bennington. And the Planning Commission, with the Select Board's approval, and working in concert with Bennington County Regional Commission, seeks to work with Dr. John Mullen of the University of Massachusetts at Amherst to develop the plan. In so doing, the Planning Commission is looking to form a steering committee that would include at least 2 Select Board members. And that's the action I'm asking you folks tonight, is if you would care to appoint 2 of your board to serve on the steering committee for this particular plan development.
So this is the $18,500 grant that BCRC is going to be monitoring with this person, is that correct, Dan?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
The idea is that we'd like to, before we finalize the scope of work and the contract, we'd like to put together a steering committee with as many select board members as we would like to. We think at least 2 would be a good idea. It is going to be fairly labor intensive, so be a lot of extra meetings, so beware what you ask for. But we would like to have at least 2 select board members. The Planning Commission will be involved, obviously our Economic Community Development Director, and we will determine with the Select Board and the Planning Commission whether or not we should have 2 or 3 other folks from other parts of the community that should be on that steering committee. So that's what we're asking for is the input from the select board on that steering committee so we could move forward with the collaborative effort between the select board and the planning commission to oversee this project.
Okay, so I've heard one volunteer here with Jim Carroll. Do I have another one?
I'll actually volunteer.
Okay, so Chris and Jim. And again, this will be intensive, I'm sure. It's important for us to do that. Dan, did an RFP go out for this to get this guy? Why did we pick this guy?
What we did is we worked with the regional commission, and they went out and searched for a consultant that they could work with to get this project in under budget. If you recall, we all understood that the $18,000 wasn't going to get us much.
Right.
What we were able to do is by leveraging the BCRC to do, I hate to call it this, but the grunt work, we could get the basics work done, and then we could bring in a consultant, a well-known, respected consultant, to oversee the final product and develop a useful implementation plan for the community.
Okay, so what will, first of all, we the town, put matching funds up.
Yes, there's some funds from the town.
CIC put matching funds up, yes or no? Chamber
BBC,
did?
and the hospital.
Okay.
As well as an individual, I forget whether he was anonymous or not.
Yeah, okay, I know what you're talking about. Now, let me ask you this. Are they being asked to put people on the steering committee? The people who have contributed to the matching funds?
Well, the people that have contributed to the matching funds will be involved. It'll be up to the select board and the planning commission to determine what additional people will be actually sitting on the steering committee.
Okay.
It's likely that, we may want somebody from the chamber, we may want somebody from BCIC. That decision has not been made yet. That's why we're asking the select board to come in and work with the planning commission to flesh that out. A steering committee, you don't want to get it too big because then it becomes unwieldy, but you also want to include a broad array of interests. That being said, the steering committee will communicate broadly with the select board and everybody that is involved in the matching funds, as well as the community at large.
Okay.
So that's the plan.
Any board members got any question on it?
I would just ask Dan, as agendas are developed for these meetings and information is sent out to board members and whoever's going to be in that committee, can we also,
Sure.
other
No,
board
I would
members?
expect that, and now that you've mentioned it, be sure to make sure that the select board is involved, is given notice of any of the meetings, and obviously any meeting is open to anybody who wants to come. Make sure that things are moving along, and we'll have regular updates with the select board as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, that's it for you, Stuart?
Just the announcement that the water and sewer funds are practically ready. I hope to be able to present them to you perhaps before the first meeting in May.
Okay, and you'll get them out to us in our packets before we meet, and we'll decide when we're going to meet?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Other business, we'll start, Jason?
Nope.
Greg?
Nope.
Chris?
No, sir.
Justin?
No.
Jim?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Let's see, Stuart, I spoke with you about a problem on Safford Street, 110 Safford, and then close to the bridge with respect to sidewalk repair there.
Actually, we dispatched a crew to the site. There was a hole that was found there that has been patched.
Okay.
The rest of the work we'll try to squeeze into our future replacement work, so it'll become part of the list.
Okay, did I see a schedule of sidewalk repairs that are planned for this summer?
What you would have seen would have been just the main project list that's been developed for the street projects that we mean to undertake. Some of those include sidewalk, and some do not.
Okay, well, the reason I brought this up is because when somebody brought it up at the cart, and that got tongues wagging, and two areas came up in particular, areas of Silver Street and Pleasant Street, right at the corner of Park, and between Park and Valentine,
Yes.
the Marble area.
That both that section of Pleasant Street and Silver Street are on the list.
Okay, great. Finally, a citizen came by the cart on, I think it was Thursday, right at the day after the accident with the police cruiser, and he expressed a concern about the potential liability with respect to an intern being injured in a case of, well, this wasn't hot pursuit, but they were on the way to a potential stabbing. And I told him that I would bring this up and bring it to your attention. And
yes. Bennington's hot pursuit policy is very, very restrictive. Talking with the chief today following your call, in the last probably 12 months, we've had 1 or 2 incidents of what would be considered hot pursuit. That's high-speed automobile chases. We traditionally do not involve our interns in those kinds of activities. Our interns is a program that's been in place for 10 years. They do come to the program with their parents' permission, with health care in place. They understand that they are at risk. We do put them in body armor when they're traveling with us, as was the case in this instance. And they do travel to calls. They're instructed to stay a safe distance in the cases of violence. But this is a program that we've been utilizing both at the high school and specifically with Southern Vermont College because of its criminal justice program for a long time. And a number of our officers currently working for us are actually interns many years ago. So the hot pursuit issue, no, we do not involve interns in those kinds of chases, as limited as they are here, but they do ride on calls. In this particular case, this was an accident that was caused by either inattentiveness or carelessness on the part of another operator who actually entered into the main thoroughfare from a side street. We're not really clear why, but certainly had a very disastrous impact. I'm happy to say the intern suffered only a concussion, a mild concussion, and both officers, one received some muscle contusions and pulls, one suffered a leg injury and will probably be out on workers' comp for some time. It's rather severe. None of the other passengers in the vehicle that hit us were injured.
Question for you, Dan. Jason probably answer this. If, let's say somebody these interns signed a waiver, would that release the town from...
I guess my first comment would be that's a legal discussion better suited for executive session,
okay.
Jim, and
right.
it would be my advice that we end the conversation
right.
about liability of the town.
Okay.
Anything else? Sharon?
No, nothing this evening.
Okay, I see John Shanahan out there. John, I'm going to ask to put you on a schedule for next meeting. What I'd like to you provide us, one, we're getting into springtime, just recap Mayfest, where you guys stand in the planning for that, recap the Tour of Dragons. They were in here talking about it, and you were here the last time. I'm concerned about business owners downtown. We had some concerns last year when we ran it. I want to know, we were told you went around with them to talk to business owners, like it's your feeling of any issues we might have out there. The other thing is I guess I was kind of surprised by what's happening with Dan Turcott up there, which is very positive in my way of thinking. He's doing what I've said we've got to do, look at the second and third stories of these buildings and put them there. Can you give us a rundown of projects that are working like that? I understand there's a couple things working besides what Dan's doing, or might you give us a synopsis of what Dan's doing? But a feeling, if you don't have it already, from the property owners, what kind of assistance do they need from us, the state, feds, regulatory, or whatever, to encourage them to do something with the second and third stories of these buildings that are unoccupied right now? We hear we have a shortage of housing in the area, and yet you and I and many of us have been on these buildings, and I mean, these are beautiful apartments, or could be, if we ever get them back in. So can you give us just kind of a synopsis of that stuff, a feel from the property owners? What do they need for assistance to help them?
I can tell you right now, it's...
Go ahead, John, get up to the mic then.
Sure, and it's, a lot of the second floors have been occupied.
Okay.
And refurbished, especially like in the Cone building where Skeeter Jelly's running it. The big property downtown is the Putnam Hotel. which I'll try to speak with Steve or Dave before next week.
Great.
See if they can join me and see if they could tell all of us exactly what it is that they would need. Because that's going to be a major project.
Okay.
But most of the two-story buildings are all occupied on the second floor, or able to be occupied, because we show them pretty frequently in Nancy Waltman's building or the Cohn building.
Okay.
That's pretty much it. We have a lot of one-stories.
Okay, super.
But I'll bring that next week.
Thanks. Stuart, I'm hearing that state employees are moving in to the new building here during this month. Have we ever received anything from BGS, Building General Service, telling us, hey, we've taken occupancy of this building and we're moving in, and come to the ribbon cutting or anything like that? I mean, is this going to be low-key or what?
I've received no official word that the building is open. I believe it's been inspected by our building inspectors department, and there are plans during the month of April to begin moving the courts and some of the other offices into the building. So it will be occupied, and Dan may have more details. Pardon me?
They're starting to move in this weekend, the courts are at least.
This coming weekend? Or
April 13th, right?
Yes, April.
Yep, that's this Friday, so they'll vote.
The courts are opening, the state's attorney's office is moving, not opening.
so we haven't had a grand opening yet, Joe.
Yeah, okay. I guess the other side of that is, once this building is occupied, what is the state's plan to these buildings, temporary buildings that are out there now, the trailers? I'd like to know what the state intends to do with those things.
I can tell you, I don't know where they are going to end up, but they do plan to remove them, but some of them it may take until August to get them out of there, but they're going to be out of there for the end of the summer.
I guess my concern is they don't treat them like the Vermont Railways do, take their dirty boxcars and put them on our railroad tracks and stick them somewhere, is my concern. Some of these, I guess, are in pretty bad shape. They need to be removed and get out of there, so.
We only own one, the rest of them are leased, and they'll be
Are they?
going back to
Okay.
the
Okay,
leasing.
good. Okay, we have need to go in executive session for personnel and contracts. Can I have a motion?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you.